Hi, today I'm going to talk about how to take care of your shakuhachi. And just when you thought shakuhachi couldn't get more complicated, or maybe you thought you knew what you needed to know about the shakuhachi, comes along this video, and I'm going to go through how to keep your shakuhachi healthy, happy, keep it alive, keep it functioning, and keep it from falling apart. So many of these flutes are quite old, and some of them have had major cracks in them that have been repaired over time. Others, you pick them up and the joint falls apart on you. Others have been cracked right here when you blow. It's a razor sharp edge, and that really ruins the original sound. So now let's start simple. I would say that if you're new to the shakuhachi and you want to get started here, why don't you start with something less self-destructive? So let's start easy. Let's start with a wooden flute. It's a shakuhachi, got 5 holes in it. There's a shorter one. This one's made out of apple wood, but basically it's turned on a lathe. It's really not going to crack like bamboo crack because it's a different kind of wood. And so if you have a cork joint, you're going to have to, once in a while, take it to a traditional European woodwind repair, American repair, and get the cork fitted to be stiffer. And that just takes a little cork lubricant. Now, your problems are solved if you get a plastic shakuhachi, which is just one solid piece, and it's really powerful and strong. It's got a delicate edge though, so you will have to protect that edge. And one thing to keep in mind, if you take up the shakuhachi and your friends want to try it out and you give it to them, the first thing they're going to do is touch that edge, and that's not what you want to do. So protect your shakuhachi from people who maybe just don't realize that this is a delicate instrument. So here's another plastic one. But this one here comes apart in 2 pieces. It has a joint, but there's no cork in it. So it's a friction fit, which means that every time you open it and close it, you're slightly taking a little material off of it. You're squeezing it, and it's an abrasive effect. Whether you have a plastic shakuhachi or a bamboo shakuhachi that has a precision fit like this, what you want to make sure to do is not open it more than you really need to. But if you do have to open it, this is how you do it. You put your hand over it, and you pound down with the other hand a few times. Look at it, and you'll see that it's separated. And then you can simply pull it straight apart. You never really want to do a twisting motion because that will grind this down more. So don't do that. Now, the idea of a flute with a joint in it is for convenience. Now in Japan and anywhere that there's a good shakuhachi maker, it's very easy to just get your joint painted every once in a while and keep it working just right. But if you don't have that available, maybe you want to not open your shakuhachi so much. So here's how you would carry it around. I would say just get a cloth and roll it up, like so. And then there you go. But let's say you're worried about that joint wearing out. So what you're going to do, once again, line it up and straight in. Worried about that joint wearing out, you might want to carry it in a tube. So here's a tube. This one here collapses, and there you go. Over your shoulder, it's pretty useful. But about the edge, you have to protect it. Now, you can get a cap for that. This one's too small. This one is just right. Come in different colors. This one's leather, and somebody here has made their own. You can also make your own cap, and it can be kind of a fun little project. It could be made out of almost anything, but leather is pretty handy. In a pinch, I will confess in public that I have used a cork once in a while, because better than nothing. Protect that edge. So let's take this one apart. There we go. Now, when it comes to bamboo, how much of this is still relevant? Well, let's see. You'd want to put a cap on bamboo. So here's my bamboo shakuhachi. You want to put a cap on it. So now that you've got a cap on it, it's a matter of transporting it. And the problem here is that if there's a joint, the joint can rock and could come apart. Like for example, I'll use this one here. If I rock like this, it will loosen up over time. So the best thing to do is to transport it and store it, always put together. That's not everybody's preference, but that's my preference. But here's the problem. When you come to bamboo, bamboo is constantly changing dimension because it's wood. And people who are lovers of wood furniture, wood craftsmanship, are well aware that every piece of wooden object in the house, a table, a chair, a door, is always expanding. The grain is going this way, and it's expanding this way, back and forth. Maybe the length, not so much, but definitely along the grain. So what we have in the shakuhachi is, it's absorbing moisture from the air on the outside, and it's swelling and getting larger and smaller and larger and smaller. So you want to minimize the change in humidity and a change in temperature. So if these flutes dry out, so what's going to happen is the surface will get drier and drier, be pulling away, and then you will get a crack, a sad crack like this one here. So here's how you prevent this from cracking. You buy a little bowl of water. In here I've got, this is called a dampit. I'm going to squeeze it out. I'll dry it off. So it's a rubber hose with a tube in it, and there's a little sponge inside of it. It drapes down. Now this will be stored vertically in the house, so with the cap on it, of course. So there's moisture coming from the inside. Now this dampit here is from the music store, DAMPIT. So that's what you want to do to keep this moisturized as well as portable. So here's the thing. I'm going to show you what I do with this is my main flute. I've been doing this for a long time. It's in a tube. It's wrapped in a plastic bag, a sturdy rubber band. And it's got a cloth wrapped around it. The cloth that's wrapped around it happens to be tied to a string. This is the cleaning rag. This is the temple. So you take a corner of your cloth, you tie a knot, you tie a string to it. On the end of it, you put a weight. You know, when you buy a shakuhachi, you may not get this when you buy it. You probably won't. You have to make this yourself. So inside here, my cap, larger diameter. Out comes the dampit, and it looks good, but you know, I'm going to swab it just before I start playing. Make sure you make your string long enough for your longest flute. Now, when I pull through, I put my hand over the blowing edge just to protect it and pull through. And there you have it. So then I play. You have to look at the other videos to hear the shakuhachi, and I'm sure you have. So this one here is ready to go. So I'm playing, and I'm going to play another flute. I lay it over here for a while. It's totally possible an hour later it could crack. Maybe the sun came in, was on it. Maybe the room dried out. I just turned the heat off before making this movie right now. So here's what you want to do. Water is your friend. And so maybe you'd want to take another nice cloth, spritz it, and just, well, okay, the plastic ones, the wooden ones, the bamboo ones, just leave a little dampness. Now, if you're going to the beach, you're going to play in the snow, you might want to use your plastic flute for that one, but you know, this is a very dry part of the world that I am in. It can be dry in the winter. So depending on where you are, you may just find that you can have your shakuhachi on display on the wall in your house on a stand, and it's perfectly fine. And these flutes come from Japan, which is a moister climate, and this one here is 100 years old, and it's been repaired, but that really hasn't changed the sound. You see, when a flute cracks, the wood is open here, and so it's still going to get wider and smaller. The width of that crack will change. Sometimes you won't be able to see it. Other times it'll look like a hairline. So what's happening is it's flexing, even though it has this binding in it. So it's a scary thought, but actually the wood needs to move. So there's two ways that you can fix a crack, or I should say, go to a repair person, have them fix the crack. One is to glue it solid and really bind it, which is what happened here. This is a major, major crack. It probably needed some filling to work. And it had many bindings, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. And that's just north of the joint. So this is a different kind of repair than what I have going on my flute. I have what they call a living crack. So we'll change, but it's a good way for me to make sure that my flute is moist. And what if it's too moist? If it's too moist, well then you'll start to grow mold in your flute. So you definitely want to put a little bleach or something on that to wipe that off. So here we are. I have a closet full of flutes. I can't have these flutes cracking. In fact, I have boxes of flutes here. Here's another way that you can store your flute. So I'm going to put this flute away in front of you so you can see once again how it goes. So I play the shakuhachi. I put my dampit in. Oh, I've swabbed it out first. I put my dampit in. I take my cap. Cap goes on. Take my cloth. Now, the root end, I put the string corner at the root end and roll it up a little bit. And then in the direction of the winding, I take the string and I slowly spiral it around. And when I get to the end, I tuck it under like this and pull it tight. Now this cloth has some moisture from the condensation of my breath in playing it. It's just added a little moisture in here, and that is perfect. So you play your flute on a regular basis. It's always a little damp. You have a dampit in it. You're storing it. This is the cap end, and that's the root. You're storing it this way, so the dampit is hanging in the center of the flute. It's not against the urushi varnish on the inside. So that's the best way to store it. But before I store it, it goes in a plastic bag. Now, I put the bag from the top down, and then I give it a twist, bend it around, and then I take my nice rubber band, give it a nice solid. Okay, I have confidence in this flute now, but I don't want to carry it in this one, because this one here rocks. So I don't want that. This is a mailing tube, so if I was going to mail a shakuhachi, I might pack it and wrap it and all that, but I wouldn't want to store it long term in my house like this. This is not really a good way to keep your flute moist, but it will keep the joint from rocking, so that's a good option. Here's another one you can buy. So where do these tubes come from? They come from the art store. These are used by architects and designers to transport blueprints, large pieces of paper, artwork. So this one here comes off. So this is pretty good. There you go. There's another option here. This also has a nice strap over your shoulder. This is really wonderful. So this was made by Monty Levinson, by the way. And in it goes, it has a zipper, and that's pretty airtight. But here's the winner. The winner is the simple tube I bought. It was under $20 at the art store. These caps are pretty tight. I can hear that low sound of suction. Okay, it's airtight. A little sponge cutoff here is in there, just floating on the top, because this is the winter and I really want to make sure it's okay. Now, the flute comes out, and like the other one, it's wrapped in plastic. So this has the advantage of holding in the moisture, keeping the joint from rocking, and also it's transportable, but you'll have to work out a strap. So these are some of your options for storing your flute. Now, these boxes here, so I have a lot of flutes. I'll tell you what's happening with these boxes. That's got a little seal here, softer rubber, so when you put the top on, it holds moisture better. It's not just a sweater box that's just loosely fitting, so it's solid. Now here is a old CD case or any little bucket and a sponge. Just a little dampness in that sponge. Change this out once a week and leave it in the box. That way you can put your flutes up to maybe 1.9 in one of these boxes. This box measures around 2 feet or around 60 centimeters by 16 inches, around 41 centimeters. And the depth not so important, but the depth is 7 inches or around 8 centimeters. So I've been using these for about a year, and what I find is they're just fine. They're just fine. As long as you don't have your sponge in a pool of water, you should be just fine, and your flutes should be perfectly healthy. So for all these flutes, I haven't suffered one crack in the house. So so that's it. You protected the joint by deciding how often you want to open it or close it and carrying it in tubes. You protected the blowing edge with the little leather cap. And so you should be able to keep moisture in it by storing it in a box, and you know how to use a dampit. So that's basically it. And before I go, there's one other thing that you should also take care of, which is your score. Now I keep the scores in sleeves, and I play in the rain, I play outdoors, so that's very useful. And most of our scores are photocopied 8.5 by 11. In that case, when you start, if you play shakuhachi on a regular basis and you're committed to it, then you would want to not lose your music and repeat the music you've learned already, and so get a collection, and it becomes your repertoire. So in this case here, you can get something with a binder and tabs, and you can be organized with your music and keep it in good condition. There's another thing that you can do, which is if you are lucky enough to buy directly from Japan, the scores that are traditionally printed like this, I would put them in archival boxes at home. That way I can always find a piece of music, and these I might not carry around with me. Like I said, I go on the Wether, so some of these scores have been printed 50, 100 years ago, so I want to protect them. So we're talking about antiques here, and it's a choice. And you don't really have to make the choice to buy or own an instrument that's very valuable and very fragile, because that could really ruin it for you. But on the other hand, there are quite sturdy shakuhachis out there, and I could recommend a few makers. You can probably see some of my other videos. And some of these shakuhachis are treated so well by the maker that they go for 50, 60, 70 years without cracking. And remember, when you work with wood, it has to be seasoned or it has to be dried out carefully, whether it goes in the barn for a year or 5 years, or whether it's held over the fire and you're harvesting the bamboo. There are tricks and there are ways to properly season a piece of wood, whether it's bamboo or apple wood, it doesn't really matter, but there's a special technique. So a reputable maker has his tricks about how to season that wood and how to make sure it stays solid over the years to come. And so that's what you get when you buy something by a good maker. But let's say flute that's cracked and repaired over and over again, it still can sound quite beautiful, and it is totally worth it to buy or own a shakuhachi with cracks in it. So I'm just trying to help you along so that you will be happy with your shakuhachi in the long term. And there's one more thing which I haven't mentioned yet, which is oil. So some people say, as soon as I get a shakuhachi, I oil it right away and then stop the cracking. Well, here's why I don't oil my flutes, and there are people who don't oil their flutes. So your flute, traditionally the shakuhachi has no oil on it. It's the oil of your hands that go into the flute. And I wish I had a prettier flute to demonstrate this. I'll take mine out again. Unravel, unroll, cap off, and damp it out. So this flute was never oiled, but it's 100 years old. That means that the finger oils of everybody who has played this flute is in there. And that's enough to keep the shakuhachi well oiled. So right now, it's a dry day in a hot apartment, and let's say I reach for that oil line and put it in. So there's a certain amount of dryness in the wood, and that's the resonance of the wood. So what's going to happen is, it sounds a little more sharper, a little harsher in the winter. And if I oil it now, it's going to hold that sound. So let's say I oil it on a humid summer day, and that's when I do the first oiling of this 100-year-old flute. Well then, supposedly you're oiling in the moisture and you're setting the sound for a moist configuration. But really, don't do that. It's meant to be changing, it's meant to be dynamic, it's meant to be as live as possible. So like a fine piece of furniture, the shakuhachi has very special care, and you really want to do things the traditional Japanese way if you can. And if you can't, then use a modern material for your shakuhachi. And so that's it. So I hope this is a big help to you, and it's taken me a long time to figure this all out. They're not hard and fast rules, but I thought you could learn from maybe some of my mistakes. Okay, bye.